What's up, guys? Today I have 3 tips to get you the biggest back mankind has ever seen. Before I tell you those 3 super secret awesome pro tips, do me a favor, hit that subscribe, hit that like button, share with some friends, keep helping the channel grow. I appreciate it. So these tips are not actually super secret. Sorry if this is your first video. I am not very good at doing the YouTube thing where I over-promise and under-deliver. I tend to like to do the other way around, where again, hopefully make some under-promises, is that a word? I don't know, and over-deliver. So tip number 1 when doing bent over T-bar rows, so these cues are all 4. These cues are gonna help pretty much as well with almost any bent over row where you don't have a chest support, not a machine, because they kind of address some of the biggest mistakes that I see. So first is very, very little and subtle, but when you pick up the weight for the first time, make sure, one, that you stand all the way up. Make sure that you properly know how to hinge. So again, to hinge basically is just isolating just what's occurring at your hips and getting in a good position first. So what I mean by all that is, 1, when you're picking it up, don't do the thing. If this is how you tend to pick it up, your deadlift probably looks like this as well too. But don't be the guy that stands right here, or gal that stands right here and rounds over like this and picks it up like this. That just hurts for all the rest of us to watch. Pick it up like you're doing a deadlift. So you would have the bar close to your shins, drop down, use some quads, use your hips, have a relatively neutral spine position so you don't break anything. Stand up all the way tall. And so when you stand up tall first, the big thing here is make sure that the bar is pretty darn close to your hips. You're most likely going to be in a good position. People will sometimes stand up and they're very far away. And when they bend down, that bar is way too in front of them. As you're rowing, you want the bar coming to your stomach or in towards your hips. So stand up tall, make sure the bar is at your hips, and then make sure you hinge, meaning you move just at the hips and not at the spine. So you are locked in a good position and in a safe position to row. So I've had some people literally that I've seen do bent over rows where I don't think they've learned how to properly hinge before they do a row. This is why it's a kind of a tough exercise, because not only should you know good row mechanics, you have to know how to properly hinge at the hips, which again means move just at your hip joint, your femur and your pelvis, while locking your spine and torso still, which involves using some of your erectors, some of your core muscles to keep your torso nice and rigid. So that is tip number 1. If you can't do that well, you got no business slapping a bunch of plates on there, because then you look like this. You're the guy that's bent over, rounded over, and going, ah, in which case this is the bicep exercise while also wrecking all of the discs in between your vertebra exercise, which, again, if your goal is to train your biceps while possibly leading to some sort of disc pathology, injuries, or issues, 5-10 years down the road, might not happen right away, then by all means, keep doing it that way. But if you want to train your back, start in a good position, stand up tall. This is my favorite way to do it. Stand up all the way tall first, brace, push the hips back, lock your body in stone. And then again, if you make sure that that bar is in towards your hips to start, you're much less likely to be out of position. You don't want to have to do a rep first to figure out you're in a bad position. You'd rather make sure you're always in a good position first, take your time and get in there. Which leads right into tip number 2. Lock your body in stone in that position, almost to the point where you're giving yourself cues to actually think about preventing what most people do. And so again, most people, if they're gonna make a mistake on a bent over T-bar row, is they're gonna use a weight that they can't actually row. So again, the goal is to row when you're doing this. That's why it's called a T-bar row, not a T-bar deadlift or a T-bar back extension, which you can do those. But again, if you're doing a T-bar row, then you should be able to row the weight. So again, if you get in this position, most people that can't actually row the weight they've selected just turn it into some sort of sometimes spinal roundy, flexiony, extension row thing, or sometimes it involves their glutes as well too, their hip muscles, and just turns into a T-bar row / hip extension, spinal extension, whatever. So get yourself in a position, lock yourself in stone. And one of my favorite cues is, while locking everything rigid, right before you row, feel like you're pushing your chest to the ground, or like you have a string that's pulling your chest to the ground. So when you row, not only are you not standing up at all, but you're actually almost feel like you're pulling forward. Now again, this is just a cue. You don't actually have to move, and most of the time when you have a lot of weight on, this will just help you keep still. I don't want you actually getting closer to the ground. I definitely don't want you rounding your spine to get your chest closer to the ground. But again, having that cue, that visual of maybe you're actually trying to press that direction, or there's a string anchoring you, I think can be very good cues to lock yourself in stone. And again, yes, your hips are still gonna work just to have to hold that position of hip flexion, because obviously if you have weight, If you just relaxed everything, the weight will pull you further into hip flexion, or it will fully pull you further into spinal extension. So yes, when you do T-bar rows, hip musculature is involved, low back muscles, erectors are involved, but they should be involved just doing isometric, keeping things still, not actively doing concentric, eccentric type stuff. Tip number 3 is use a wider handle if possible. I know everyone doesn't have this handle. If you want this handle, just get on this thing called Google and search multi-grip T-bar handle. I would love to be able to put an exact link. I think I originally got this one off Amazon. Last time I looked, it wasn't in stock. Otherwise, I'd put it down there for you. I don't make these. I should make them and put my logo on them and charge twice as much as they actually cost to make, but I haven't got there yet, maybe in the future. But anyway, so search that if you want that. I realize not everyone wants to spend 50, 60 bucks on a handle, but I'm just gonna throw that out there. But in lots and lots of gyms where people do the T-bar handles, you know, they have that little, I like to call the baby handle. Don't get butthurt. Sorry, Fuad, if you're watching this, but there's a little baby handle. Not always bad, depending on the individual, but for most people, a little bit of a wider grip will just allow for more upper arm motion. Realize the muscles you're trying to train here are gonna be more affected by your upper arm's ability to move than anything else. So again, if we're trying to train upper arm stuff that detaches to it, so lats, rear delts, you want that upper arm to move freely. Also, if we're training the muscles that attach to your shoulder blades, how far you can move your upper arm will also determine how much range of motion can you have at your shoulder blades as well too. So when possible, choose a wider grip. And again, instead of sometimes that little V handle, your gym lots of times has a wider V handle. Sometimes there's a way to put a wider bar in there, and lots of gyms are actually getting more T-bar attachments with a wider grip, because the reality is if you have it at least at shoulder width, that gives you a lot more options whether you want to train lats or you want to train upper back. Again, opt for wider handles when you can. So that is it. 3 tips for a better T-bar row. First one being just get yourself in a good position first. So get up, stand up tall, make sure the handles are in the right position. Isolate hip flexion, isolate hinging, so hip flexing, lock everything else in stone. Right into tip number 2, keep all that locked in stone the entire time you are rowing. So make sure you are not pulling up, not doing active concentrics with hip muscles, glutes, hamstrings, adductors, or not going through spinal flexion extension using your hip, spinal extensors. Keep all that locked in stone, just doing isometrics, and make sure the only thing moving is shoulder blades, shoulder joint, and all that stuff that moves that you want to train. And then tip number 3 is when available, always try and go with a wider handle just to allow for more freedom of motion. Again, not saying the little baby handle is always bad, but in reality, you're generally gonna have more versatility with a wider handle, or again, the whole point of this multi-grip handle, depending on the way you turn the handle, you can use these closer ones, wider ones, or even way out here wide for some stuff as well too. So that is it. Hopefully those tips help you get a better T-bar row and ultimately a better back. If you've got some questions, comments, concerns, or feelings, utilize that comment section. Let me know what you guys got. And as always, I appreciate the support. Keep sharing the page. I appreciate you guys helping this bad boy grow. And until the next one.